Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. We are here for a live look ahead at UFC Vegas 83. We've got Song Yadong taking on Chris Gutierrez in the main event. This was supposed to be UFC Shanghai. I think people were really excited to see, the Asian market get a little bit of that attention, a little bit of a showcase. They've got some fighters on the card as well from that part of the world, but instead, some other conflict, some other, consideration for the UFC has brought this card back to the Apex Center. But alas, we still got fights to break down. We're excited about that fact, and I'm excited to break it down with you guys. So if you're new here, welcome aboard. I'm excited that you're here today. If you're a regular, thank you so much for being part of the show once again. My first look is where I start to break down the fights. And this week, it's a little bit later in the process than I normally like to do. I normally like to come to you guys Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, right earlier in the week. But the problem was I wasn't feeling that great this week. We've had some cancellations. We've had some stuff pulled from the card. So my research process just got pushed back a little bit. So what I've got for you is the first look today, and we've got a very special show coming your way tomorrow as well. So stay tuned for more information about that. But without further ado, let's start like we always do on the first look, guys. And we're going to take a look at this main event to get us started. We've got Song Yadong taking on Chris Gutierrez. It's a very meaningful fight at 135 pounds. You've got a very wide line as well. I'm pulling up best fight odds right now so we can talk about current odds. But I know the last time I saw it, best available price on Song Yadong was minus 333. You were looking at minus 400 and, a great disparity in the minus 300 range as well. So obviously, Song Yadong entrenched here as a pretty heavy favorite. On the other side, Chris Gutierrez, he's coming in here as a sizable underdog. He's in a main event, but he's coming off of a win. Last time out, he was able to bounce back. He got a win over Alatong Haley. But prior to that, guys, you'll remember he got pretty cleanly defeated by Pedro Munoz in a 15-minute affair that they had. So Chris Gutierrez kind of needs to get it going right now at 32 years of age, a guy that's, 1-2 in his, 1-1 in his last two fights. He really needs to take that step forward. He's got this opportunity because Petr Yan wasn't able to make the walk here on Saturday night for whatever reason. So this was supposed to be a fight between Song Yadong and Petr Yan. Now Chris Gutierrez is trying to play spoiler. He gets that big shot, that big opportunity. And we've seen these Factory X fighters have been having a pretty good time. He's listed at Chop Shop MMA via Tapology, but I believe he's one of these guys like Cody Brundage, like Brandon Royval that's training out of Factory X Muay Thai. And so you expect that Chris Gutierrez is going to be getting better over time, but at 32 years of age, he's pretty close to a finished product. So what do we know about him? We know that Chris Gutierrez has excellent leg kicks. That's the primary offensive tool that he's going to look to. But we also know that he's got decent enough boxing. I would say that defensively, he's a little bit more of a liability, whereas on offense, he has a lot of potency, right? We've seen that with the leg kick stoppages, but we've also seen, I was there in person, the spinning back fist knockout of Danabat Gari. Extremely impressive knockout in that spot. But let's go back and just examine the record of Chris Gutierrez, because I do think it bears, some examination. Losing to Howney Barcelos, we'll give you a total pass for that. Especially coming off of the Ultimate Fighter in that spot. He had prior gotten wins over Jimmy Flick and Ray Rodriguez, two serious fighters in the LFA. So this shows Chris Gutierrez been a serious guy for a long time. But he loses to Henny Barcelos, very talented, very skilled, and a guy that has now fallen off due to age, but he was at his peak of his powers at the time. So you could forgive that. He gets a win over Ryan McDonald, Geraldo de Freitas, Vince Morales, and then he draws with Cody Durden. He had a 10-8 first round go against him. He was able to work his way back into that. Keep in mind, though, Cody Durden is a flyweight in the UFC. This is a 135-pound matchup, and Cody Durden dominated him in the grappling in the early going there, was able to take him down, take his back, and really expose some of those grappling vulnerabilities in the Gutierrez game. Now he fights Andre Ewell. He fights Felipe Colares, Danabat Gari, the fight that I mentioned. And then the stellar win of his career is the knockout of Frankie Edgar in the first round. But let's be frank about something, guys. And I don't mean that that as a play on words. Frankie Edgar at the time was just shot, unfortunately. And it happens to all fighters if you stick around for a really long time. That was at the end of his run. He was trying to find any way to get a win back under his belt, but he had been knocked out in devastating fashion by by Corey Sandhagen. Prior to that, I'm going back to the record of Frankie Edgar right now. He ended his career on 3 straight knockout losses, via knees and front kicks to the face against Marlon Vera, Corey Sandhagen, and Chris Gutierrez. So Chris Gutierrez was the last person to beat Frankie Edgar, but he was not the one to, really change his chin forever or something like that. He just caught a Frankie Edgar at the right time and he was able to, deal with him accordingly. But Pedro Muniz, I've said before, I've mentioned it on Twitter, that he has one of the best chins in the history of MMA, especially in the bantamweight division. So when you look at that fight for Chris Gutierrez, you would think, okay, that shouldn't, necessarily take away Gutierrez's chance to win. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, normally if you're like, let's say you're Rob Font and you're a primary boxer, that's your number one skill set. How are you going to beat a guy like Pedro Muniz? It's tough, right? Same thing with Cody Garbrandt. We've seen this play out a number of times. If you want to take somebody out by knocking them out, by punching them in the face, and they just have a rock solid chin and can take the shots and keep throwing back, it's going to be a really tough fight for you, even if you have, more skills on paper, let's say, right? And so we've seen that with Pedro Muniz a number of times. If you want to bring that boxing archetype, it's going to be a hard night for you. However, we've seen, fighters that implement a lot of kicks, that move a lot, have given him fits in the past. We see Aljamain Sterling, a guy known for his grappling, a guy known for his ability to take fights to the mat. He was able to actually expose the striking of Pedro Muniz by keeping him constantly moving one position to another and throwing more volume. So there's been paths shown for how to beat, these guys on the feet in terms of Pedro Muniz, but he was not able to replicate that, right? We saw Gutierrez really struggle to get his kicking game going in that spot. We saw somebody with diligent kicks and diligent kick defense like Pedro Muniz, who was checking, was able to have some success in that spot against Chris Gutierrez at his own game. What we also noticed is that he was able to blitz Gutierrez and get him out of position a few times when Gutierrez is trying to come forward. He's trying to line up those low kicks. He's trying to stay just on the edge of range. And so you can kind of catch people when they get flat-footed or when they're looking for their own offense and blitz into them. And we see that constantly from Pedro Muniz in terms of how he was able to have success and get to Chris Gutierrez and land on his chin. And that's exactly what I see as the path for Song Yadong in this spot. Song Yadong, I think the ultimate question for him in this matchup, how is he going to deal with the leg kicks of his opponent? We know that Pedro Muniz, very well skilled in checking kicks, in returning with leg kicks of his own. We want to see in this matchup if Song Yadong has that same set of skills, but he's young. He's dynamic in his offense. He's got a lot of power in his hands. I would argue he is more powerful than somebody like Gutierrez, but I also think that he has more paths to victory here. What do I mean by that? I think that Song Yadong can implement takedowns in a matchup like this and get Chris Gutierrez to the floor. We talk about Cody Durden. Yes, he has the wrestling credentials, but he is a 125-pounder. So Durden was able to take him to the ground, gassed out a little bit in that spot. If he wasn't on short notice, we might have seen Cody Durden just ride out Chris Gutierrez for the full 15 minutes. So I do think of this as, 25-minute spot. We know that Song Yadong can go. He can fight with elite bantamweights. He can push himself deep into the fight. He's got great skills on the feet. He's got great skills on the ground. And the way that you've been, seeing him taken out in the past, he has 2 losses via TKO. One is via a cut stoppage against Corey Sandhagen. Really not too much that you could do about that. And prior, he was knocked out by somebody with like 30 more professional fights than him back in 2016. But when you look at Song Yadong overall, he has been quite durable throughout the course of his career. Even that Corey Sandhagen fight, he was really protesting the stoppage there. So I think of this as a fight where Song Yadong should have all the paths to victory here. He should be able to get the job done, but it's not going to be easy. Gutierrez is not a punk. He's not an easy quitter. Even that fight that wasn't going his way against Pedro Muniz, he could have checked out. He found a way to stay in the fight. He fought hard for the full 15 minutes. He's got a great record of 8-2-1 in the promotion. But I think that when you dig into the numbers, when you dig into the data behind who he's been fighting, I think he's been set up to win a little bit along the way. And I do think of Song Yadong as a guy who is, really earned his spot in the UFC. You look at the 9-2-1 record for Song Yadong. He has wins over Ricky Simone, Marlon Moraes, granted, at the end of his run. Casey Kenny, very close fight, difficult fight. Song was able to get the win there. Marlon Chito Vera got the win there via unanimous decision, very close and controversial fight. But again, you're just looking at the quality of opposition. When he fights the best guys, he's giving them a run. He's giving them a really solid fight. And I think that he has proven he deserves this step up in terms of promotional experience, right? He's taking this 5-round fight. He's getting a rebooked spot here. So it seems to me like the promotion really likes Song. They want to put him in a big spot. They want to give him an opportunity. And I think that that's exactly what he has here. So I'm expecting the Team Alpha Male product to get the win here. I think he's going to have more cardio. I think he's going to have more energy. I think he's going to be able to push for longer. So whether it's an early stoppage or a late stoppage, I just have a feeling Song Yadong's not going to let Chris Gutierrez hang in there for 25 minutes with him. I think he's going to try and hurt him with big shots. think he's going to try and take him down if the opportunity presents itself. I think he's eventually going to beat him up. So give me Song Yadong in the main event. I think he's going to get the job done, and I think it should be a hell of a fight. Now let's move along to the co-main event. We've got a great scrap here. We've got a very interesting fight between Anthony Smith and Khalil Rountree Jr. I believe the line has completely flipped in this spot, guys. We saw at opener, Khalil Rountree, I believe, was plus 200. Let me just pull up fightodds.io. So shout out to them. I don't get paid to talk about any of these sites, but I'll always just tell you guys the resources I use that I find helpful. Fightodds.io. I like to see the openers that they have at Bet Online. So when we look at the Bet Online opener here, plus 210 on the Khalil Rountree side, that did not last long. Instantly gets bet down to about minus 255. Line flips completely. So they open the line at low limits. It gets completely flipped. It gets completely dumped on, right? And then now we see basically the opposite, right? We had seen Anthony Smith peak at plus 210, I believe, and now he's come back down a little bit. So we're seeing a minus 195 number next to Khalil Rountree's name. And I got to say, there's some definite red flags that I have on the Khalil side. Now, let's talk about the positives first. His power is exceptional. He's looked very good in his recent performances. He's looked more motivated. He seemed like he wants to be out there, right? And he's done a good job of landing impactful blows. He smells blood in the water. He gets the finish. I like to see that as well from Khalil Rountree. And I do think we've seen a much more aggressive and a much more consistent version of him in his recent octagon performances. But let's talk about the fact that we've got a guy in Khalil Rountree here who has not put together a great record as a favorite in the UFC. And people are quite bullish on him this weekend. And listen, I understand, at the plus money number, why you have to have some Khalil Rountree in this spot, right? You could see Anthony Smith be washed. We've seen examples of him starting to slow down, starting to drop off a little bit in the past. But the question is, how much Anthony Smith regression would there have to be for the line to be justified in this spot? Because let's take a look here. We have a 8-fight sample size in the UFC with Khalil Rountree as a favorite. Over that sample size, guys, he's 3-5 for a negative 39.1% ROI. So I know that lately he's been paying people off. He's been doing the job. He's been getting it done. And so I think that there's a lot of recency bias that says, hey, Khalil Rountree, he can't make a mistake. He can't fall. He can't falter. And I do think that that's a little bit short-sighted. Now, I think the UFC gave Khalil a very winnable opportunity here, right? Anthony Smith has looked like a little bit of a lesser version of himself in recent performances. Want to be respectful. He is coming off a win here, but they've been giving him the Ryan Spann fights over and over to get him wins back under his belt, right? He had a great run. He got to the title level. He stumbled, and now he's been on a little bit of a regression run. So the question is Anthony Smith going to be able to make Khalil Rountree extend this fight or grapple? If you look in the past, Khalil Rountree is a minus level grappler in the UFC by any standards. Shout out to Mark, says Khalil has lost every single fight he's been taken down in. Huge red flag. Don't really feel like Khalil minus 250 is appropriate. I tend to agree with you in that assessment, Mark. I think that's really, cognizant. Let's see what we have here. What's up, guys? Rountree should obliterate Smith, but watching Smith isn't that easy, and Rountree has been hit in the past. So destruction, but not sure. I mean, yeah, to your point there, I don't see Anthony Smith as a guy who's easy to take out. Let's be frank. Anthony Smith is very tough. Is he a guy that you can be in good positions on? Yes. Is he a guy that you maybe could take out of there with leg kicks, this, that, or the other? For sure. But we know that he's willing to spit out teeth to keep fighting. Like we've seen Anthony Smith. Toughness has never been the issue for him. So for me, the question is, can he produce a takedown? Can he extend this fight, or will he just get blasted out in the early going? Because I do think the speed difference, the strength difference will probably be apparent early, but I have a feeling that after a couple minutes, Khalil will start taking bigger, deep breaths. He'll be trying to manage his pace and trying to, keep himself within himself. And we've seen in the past, Khalil just break under pressure. Let's talk about the fact that Khalil Rountree Jr., 12-5 overall as a professional, but he's had bouts of inactivity along the way, currently on a 4-fight win streak. And you could take nothing away from the Bukauskas fight or the Roberson fight, but the Dustin Jacoby fight was a very close decision. Seemed like it could have went, either way, but I lean towards Dustin Jacoby getting the nod in that spot. And then the Dawkins fight last time out, Dawkins doesn't get any takedowns. He gets easily, sparked in that spot. So that is a very live outcome here. You look at the Tapology predictions, 82% of Khalil Rountree voters think that he's going to get it done by knockout. He's got 78% of the Tapology votes here. So people are expecting Khalil to get the job done. Obviously, the odds makers came to market with the wrong price in this spot. But were they wrong by this amount? Because let's just talk about the fact that we have Khalil open as a plus 200, which implies he's going to win 33% of the time. Okay. And now he is out to a minus 190, which would imply he's going to win this fight 65.5% of the time. So what we're talking about is a market correction of 32%. Okay. And I do think that somewhere along the line was the point of like the tipping point for value. Okay. And so I do think that Anthony Smith deserves to be an underdog in this spot. I don't think that he has as many clean paths to winning this fight on the feet via knockout. I don't really see that coming unless Khalil gasses out or ends up in terrible positions on bottom. So for me, Anthony Smith has two paths to winning this fight, which is primarily via submission or via ground domination or gutting out a gritty, close, disgusting decision at light heavyweight. And so I do think he should be an underdog, but I also think that, when he was at plus 200, that to me did scream recency bias. It screamed you got one guy who's fought tough, really high level fighters like Ankalaev at the top of their game, and he hasn't always come up aces. That happens. Whereas when you're fighting lower echelon guys in the division, when you're fighting a guy who's never been at light heavyweight in the UFC in Dawkins, you're going to look a certain way. So I think that this is a winnable fight for Khalil Rountree, but I can't endorse the big chalk price on Khalil here. And I do think that I would almost rather have the fight not to go or some kind of violence prop than Khalil on the money line here, because I do think that if he's winning this fight as easily as everybody seems to think, then he should take out somebody like Anthony Smith. He should just bring him out to pasture. But if Anthony Smith is hanging in there and this fight is getting extended, I don't trust Khalil to keep making good decisions over the course of 15 minutes. And we've seen other guys, lesser fighters, really challenge him. So yeah, for me, I'll believe it when I see it against the top echelon guys in the division. But so far, I haven't really been blown away by, Khalil's wins or his quality of competition. So yeah, I do love this quote from Bobbert Fish Sticks in the chat. Says, can't wait for Anthony Smith to call for the next title shot, regardless of the result. Yeah, I do think Anthony Smith, his media persona can be a bit grating at times, but we wish him the best on this show. Best of luck this weekend. But I do think if he's not getting this fight to the ground, he's got a really tough road to hoe in that first round. He's going to be absorbing some damage, but we've seen that from him before. They don't call him Lionheart for no reason. So should be a hell of a scrap. But don't feel very bullish on that one personally. Next up, guys, we got a short notice fight here between Sumudaerji and Tim Elliott. And speaking of fights that I don't feel super bullish on, these guys both have massive red flags for me coming into this fight. You got a 36-year-old on short notice and Tim Elliott. Don't love to see that. He is coming off of a loss, got submitted by Muhammad Makayev. However, he was up on the scorecards, according to the judges, in that fight with Makayev. So clearly showed that he can compete, that he could scrap. But it's the same problem that's gotten to Tim Elliott a lot throughout the course of his career. He is 10-6 in fights that go the distance, but he is 6-6 in fights that end via submission, 3-1 to the KO. So he's been finished many, many times, 7 times as a professional, 9-7 career to the inside the distance. So a lot of volatility from the Tim Elliott side in his past run. Let's look at his UFC run, where he has only one finish win, guys. Just one finish win compared to 5 submission losses. So 1 sub win, 5 sub losses. Tim Elliott has fought a brutal schedule of competition. But when you see this guy just puts his neck in bad spots, he gets caught in bad situations, he can slow down, gas out. You can be attritional in your approach and break down Tim Elliott over the course of the fight. I think of examples like the Brandon Royval fight. They were having a great competitive scrap, but Tim just could not continue at the pace that Royval was setting. And so eventually he broke in that spot. Ben Wynn was able to submit him in the very first round. Same thing with Davis and Daisuguera Figueiredo. We've seen Mateus Nicolau and Askar Askarov outwork him to decisions. So this is a guy that has skills, but he had to cheat, in my view, against against Tagiru Ulanbekov. He admitted, like, yeah, I cheated in that fight. So what? Like, when you look at the Victor Altamirano fight, Victor Altamirano just couldn't stop a takedown at all. But even in that fight, I just felt like I didn't come away super impressed by Tim. And I do worry about his ability to take damage at 36 years old in this weight class, cutting weight on short notice. I don't think he ever took a punch that well. And, I did mention to somebody last time out that when he fought a striker next, I did think that it was going to come due and he was going to end up getting finished. And now he's fighting a primary striker in the Tibetan Eagle, Sumudaerji. And guys, we have 13-0 to the knockout, Sumudaerji, but 1-5 career to the sub. So these guys both have 5 submission losses, 2 guys that have been put through the ringer in that regard. And when you look, only one of them has prolific submission offense, right? And that is obviously the Tim Elliott side here. They had Sumudaerji originally scheduled to fight Alan Nascimento. So you have to think that his camp, his preparation has been geared around anti-grappling, getting the fight up on the feet, keeping the fight up on the feet, and landing big, devastating strikes, because that's when Sumudaerji is at his best. He did land big against Malcolm Gordon, dropped him, knocked him out in the first round, but we've also seen Malcolm Gordon does not have a great chin historically. We've also seen that in the past, Sumudaerji has been able to land a ton of knockouts on the regional scene, but he was submitted in his UFC debut. He got submitted via armbar against the always dangerous Luis Smolka. He did get submitted again last time out against Matt Schnell, fight of the year candidate. They were landing big shots. They were in the pocket. They were exchanging. And it looked many times like Matt Schnell was time traveling, like he was hurt, rocked. Sumudaerji, unable to close the show there, did end up slowing down a little bit. Cardio is a bit of a concern. And most importantly, I think he tore his ACL in that spot. So Sumudaerji, I believe, is coming back from a surgery in this spot. I do think that he's going to have to recover and respond well here because, that last fight was a great fight, but it wasn't a, replicable fight. You don't want to have 10 of those in your career. It was a brutal fight. He absorbed a ton of damage. He came away from it, needing a pretty serious rest and recovery period as well. So scheduled to fight Alan Nascimento, I think that Sumudaerji, knows what to expect here. The UFC is going to test my grappling. They're going to find out whether I have the goods here. And at 3-2 in the UFC, with 1 win by finish, I think he really needs to do something to cement himself here. But I think it's going to be a tough fight. So for me, I'm most interested in this fight not to go the distance, just from a gut level feeling. I think Sumudaerji very possibly can get submitted in this spot. I think that on the other side, Tim Elliott, not surprised at all if he gets knocked out in this spot, especially cutting weight on short notice to fight a puncher like this. So for me, the things that I'm looking at here are probably going to be violence related. I just like both of these guys in their offensive realm, and I hate their defense. I think that they're both super liable to get finished. So those are the things I'll be looking at here. But great fight on paper. Should be a really fun time. And it seems like Tapology is super bullish on Tim Elliott here, despite him being on short notice and despite his recent run of wins not really being all that impressive. The Tatsuro and Bekoff win is a good win, and we'll give him some credit for that. But again, did acknowledge himself that he cheated. Victor Altamirano, I mean, it's just a very average fighter in the UFC. So yeah, I think that this should be a good scrap. And Sumudaerji, this is a prospect check for him. Is he still a prospect, or have the surgeries, have the other things, the damage he's taken, the lack of the formal ground game, is that going to hold him back for his whole career? Krakatazo says, is it true Tim Elliott said he wants to test his striking this fight? If he did, that's hilarious. I would love to see that. Maybe we bet the ends by KO, fade the narrative on somebody getting submitted here. But in either case, I think that this should be a fun one. 2 guys that are going to go out there and scrap, and 2 guys that normally compete at flyweight. Oh, they're competing at bantamweight. Very interesting. So that should give Tim Elliott a little bit more of a chance, right? He won't have to cut all that weight. So should be a little bit more interesting on the feet there. But next up, guys, we have another main card bout. We've got Nasrat Haqparast taking on Jamie Mullarkey. I'm going to go a little bit faster on some of these fights, just out of respect for your time. I don't think that this is the highest level fight card that we've ever seen. So let's go with Nasrat Haqparast first. What does he do? What does he bring to the table? I've always thought he's a very average fighter, to tell you the truth. I think he's got pretty good stand-up in the boxing realm purely. But even there, we've seen guys like Bobby Green just cleanly outbox him. So what you're good at, somebody else in the UFC is better at, that's tough when you're a specialty kind of fighter, because you look, is his wrestling good? No, he got easily out wrestled by Dan Hooker. Really didn't have much to offer in that spot. Is his grappling good? No, I don't think he's ever won a fight by submission. Is his striking, lights out exceptional? Not really. No, because he's had a bunch of fights that he's had to win close competitive decisions in the UFC. And he's not knocking out everybody. He is not the most heavy-handed guy. 9-1 career to the knockout. He did get knocked out by Drew Dober. But you look at his UFC run, he only has one win by knockout, and it was over Joaquim Silva way back. So this is a guy that has no knockout win since 2019, and he is kind of a meat and potatoes, gonna step forward, gonna land that overhand left, gonna try and throw basic combinations, most of it coming with that left hand, if my memory serves. So I just don't really believe in a guy like Nasrat, long term. Is this a winnable fight for him? Absolutely. Because Jamie Mullarkey is a guy that stands in the pocket. He's willing to get hit. He's got a 17-6 record with 4 of those losses coming by way of knockout. So 10-4 to the knockout is Jamie Mullarkey. More wins by KO, but also 3 more losses by KO on that Mullarkey side, and just a 5-4 record in the UFC compared to a 7-4 record for Nasrat Haqparast. So Haqparast, more experience in the UFC, a little bit higher quality of competition by and large. But let's talk about the fact that this guy came in. He fights, Alexander Volkanovski on the regional scene, got knocked out in that spot brutally, absolutely brutally. You guys should go back and watch that if you've never seen it. One of Volk's all-time great knockouts in that spot. And he got knocked out in a subsequent bout as well, round 2 knockout in the follow-up bout to the Volk matchup. So then you guys go look. That Brad Riddell fight should have easily been stopped. If you go back and watch, I mean, Mullarkey fought tough. He is a gangster for being willing to take that damage. But straight up, Jamie Mullarkey got walloped at various points in that fight. I think multiple judges gave out 10-8s for different rounds. It was 30-26 on 2 judges' scorecards. So Jamie Mullarkey got battered by Brad Riddell. And then he lost a very close, competitive, controversial decision against Fares Zion. He gets the win over Kama Worthy, who never had a UFC level chin, with all due respect. And then he gets the win over Devontae Smith, another guy who doesn't really have a great chin, who doesn't have great cardio. And, if he wasn't from Cleveland, I would probably have more negative things to say, about his fighting style. But he is from Cleveland, so I'm going to say shout out to him, wish him the best, hope that everything comes around for him. But the truth be told, I just didn't think that Jamie Mullarkey has distinguished himself. That win over Michael Johnson, thought easily could have went the other way. And Michael Johnson is an older fighter, who has been struggling immensely in his recent performances. Got the win over Francisco Prado just by out wrestling him, out hustling him. And I think that that's what Jamie Mullarkey's got to do to win this fight. Nasrat Haqparast is no prize, but Jamie Mullarkey has a punchable face, bad defense, and Nasrat Haqparast will try and punch him as hard as he can in the face over and over and over again. So that's what I'm expecting from this fight. It's an IQ test in some ways for Jamie Mullarkey. If Jamie Mullarkey isn't attempting frequent takedowns in this fight, I think he's a complete bonehead, because I don't think Nasrat's very good at wrestling. I do think he can tire out if you force him to wrestle. And I think that Jamie Mullarkey, while not having that great of a top game, right, his ground and pound's not that good, his submission game, not that good, but he does just have a grinding type of style. He does just want to be out there. So I wouldn't be all that stunned if Jamie Mullarkey just grinds on Nasrat Haqparast until Nasrat is slowing down. We saw Dan Hooker, a primary striker, a tall, long, lanky, awkward guy, just go out there and take down Nasrat a number of times, control him on the ground. So for me, I just think this is probably a dog or pass situation. I hate the Jamie Mullarkey side, just in general. I don't like how he fights. I don't like his defense. And I don't like his lack of aggression, right? If you have to be out there fighting perfect for 15 minutes when you've already been chin checked a lot of times in your career, I don't like it. So for me, I think that Nasrat probably wins a close fight here, but I just don't think there's any value on the Nasrat side. I don't believe in betting on him at minus 200 prices really against anybody. And I think on the Jamie Mullarkey side, he's just a very average lightweight. I don't think either of these guys have a high ceiling, truth be told. But I think in terms of marketing dollars, I think in terms of who's worth more to the company, it's Nasrat Haqparast. He does train at TriStar. I think a very good gym as well for, not for everybody, but for guys that are already high-level pros. I think Firas Zahabi is a genius of fighting. I think he can give you good advice to help you. So for me, those are a couple of things that I'm looking at here, but I just don't feel enough to say Nasrat Haqparast minus 200 when he's mostly just a pretty basic boxer, right? Like that just seems like a pretty limited skill set to cover minus 200 against a guy who probably is more likely to wrestle and probably is more likely to get takedowns, have top control, and also, potentially could compete on the feet, right? Both these guys have a bunch of wins by knockout. It's 155 pounds. Anybody can get cracked on the chin. So for me, just seems like a Jamie Mullarkey or pass spot, and probably leaning towards a pass there for me. Next up, guys, let's take a look at the main card opener. This is our main card opener, and it's two guys that I really like. You got on the one hand, Jun-Young Park, fun fighter, South Korea, the Iron Turtle. He likes to dance. He likes to go out there, take people to the ground, beat them up. Very functional MMA. And if I said that Jamie Mullarkey likes to have a top game that's very boring, not a lot to it, not a lot of ground and pound, not a lot of submission attempts. The opposite tends to be true for Jun-Young Park. He's not out there attempting subs at a super high clip. Every doing is beating people up, pressuring them from top position, using his ground and pound effectively to open people up. And he just outlasts his opponents, guys. We've seen it in the past with Albert Duraev. We saw him go out there and gut out a win in a very difficult spot against Eric Anders as well. But that was kind of what got me off the Iron Park train. That Eric Anders fight, I thought Iron Park should be able to compete with him in the boxing at worst. I thought that he should be able to take him down. I thought he should be able to win. The exchange is a little bit easier. Instead, it turned into a very close fight, razor thin. He was minus 200 in that spot. So it does give me some hesitation about Jun-Young Park in these big favorite situations. Think about the fight that he had with Gregory RoboCop Rodriguez. I bet RoboCop that night. It was a back and forth affair. It was a really close scrap. He was doing fine in the grappling, but the ultimate problem was his chin. He kind of got cracked on the chin and hurt, wobbled, rocked in that spot. Anthony Fluffy Hernandez was able to put the brakes to him by hurting him, hit him to the body, really hurt him in that spot. Jun-Young Park kind of folded up. And when you look, despite him having a lot of wins in the UFC and a ton of success, we got to give a little bit of consideration to the Duraev performance. Duraev completely gassed out, got busted up with a jab in the early going, broke his nose, and I think he quit. Honestly, I just don't think Duraev wanted to be there at all after he hurt his nose. He had hurt himself versus Kopylov, broke his nose, I think, and then had to hold on for 15 minutes. Really tough fight. Same thing happened against Jun-Young Park from a basic jab, and he said, I'd rather see myself out. Dennis Tululian just can't fight in the UFC. No disrespect. He's just not UFC level at all. Joseph Holmes doesn't have the physicality at all to compete in the UFC, and Jun-Young Park was able to take him down and get him out of there. Hopefully Joseph can continue to put some things together, wishing the best for him. Eric Anders, again, that fight could have went either way. I'm a Jun-Young Park backer. I bet him that night. I was lucky to get the ticket across the finish line. Gregory Rodriguez, I said I faded him there, right? I bet Gregory Rodriguez, a guy that hasn't fully panned out in the UFC. He's had some ups and some downs, some moments of struggle and failure. He was able to get the big win there, big knockout as well. So then you look before that, guys, majority win over Tafon Chukwi, not a very high-level fighter. John Phillips, not a UFC-level fighter. Marc-Andre Barrios, that's a good win. That aged fine, and outlasted another guy who tends to build on people, who tends to have that, downhill style where they just continue to pressure you until you break. So for me, what becomes fascinating about this fight is I think that Jun-Young Park is a very talented guy. I think he's highly skilled, 7-2 in the UFC. There's nothing wrong with his game at all. And I think that from a cardio standpoint, that is why he probably deserves to be favored here. Because the ABCs say always bet on cardio, right? And you look at Jun-Young Park historically, he has great cardio. Unless you hit him, hurt him badly, he can continue to fight hard, typically for the full 15 minutes and continue to pressure people. He's landed a ton of shots when he was on top of the likes of John Phillips and company. But Andre Muniz is a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, very high level. He submitted the likes of Jacare Souza by breaking his arm in the first round. Eric Anders, I don't think he's ever been submitted prior in his entire MMA career. Yep, that's true. Eric Anders' only submission loss as a professional MMA fighter is to Andre Muniz via armbar in the first round. Uriah Hall, is not a guy that you think of as having a good ground game, but he has never been submitted in his professional career, and he was easily dominated by Andre Muniz. From the back mount for the majority of that fight. But if we look back, we could also poke some holes in Andre Muniz's resume, right? Bartosz Fabinski, easiest win of his career. I bet on Andre Muniz bigly in that spot. Antonio Arroyo, not a UFC level fighter in my view. Taylor Johnson, also probably not a UFC level fighter in my view, but either way, that one was kind of close. Went to a decision with Bruno Assis on the Contender Series. Azamat Mirzakhanov took him out with one punch when they fought on the regional scene. Big knockout in that spot. His chin has always been a liability. 4 and 5 career to the knockout prop. So Andre Muniz is underwater when it comes to these knockouts. He's never had a great chin. That's been evident from early in his career, where he's been knocked out since 2011, right? And multiple times at that. Last time out, Paul Craig, not a prolific knockout artist, was able to get him out of there. But I think that had more to do with fatigue, with position, and with him breaking. And that's the ultimate problem I have with Andre Muniz. Does he have real skills? Yes. Is he an extremely dangerous fighter? Absolutely. Does he have skills that could trouble Jun Young Park? 100% he does. So I'm not advocating the Jun Young Park minus 200 line either. Like, Jun Young Park could get submitted in the first round here, and it could look fairly elementary. But the problem is, Jun Young Park has a skill set with a higher ceiling, because he can do this and apply this craft against a lot of people. Whereas we've seen now with Andre Muniz, against high-level guys like Paul Craig, against high-level guy Brendan Allen, two guys that were both just competing in a main event themselves, that he doesn't have the cardio to go at the UFC level. So the question is, where is his ceiling at really? And you'd have to think it's not that high, unfortunately. And I liked Andre Muniz coming into the UFC, but he's 33 years of age. He's never had a great chin. His chin's only going to get worse. He's been hit a million times in the chin. He's been exposed now as not having the best wrestling, not having the best grappling. Because seriously, last time out, he got out-grappled by Brendan Allen as well. Let's be very frank about what happened. Brendan Allen went out there and out-grappled Andre Muniz because he treated it like a mixed martial arts fight and not like jiu-jitsu. He punched him, he hurt him, he made him second-guess himself, he forced him into bad positions. That, for me, is enough to say, hey, Jun Young Park, he has an IQ test again in front of him here. If he goes out there and shoots takedowns in the first 2 seconds, we're just going to know that Jun Young Park's not a very smart guy. But if he goes out there and he keeps Andre Muniz chasing after him, he touches him with the jab, he doesn't get into extended firefight situations on the feet, he makes him work, he pushes him against the fence, lands a couple short shots in close, keeps his elbows tight the whole time. If he can do that, then Jun Young Park could easily beat him in this spot. He just has to be careful, right? He's got to treat it like an IQ test. Andre Muniz could break your arm in 1 second. He could break your arm in a quick exchange. He has a very unorthodox series, guys. If you've ever done jiu-jitsu, or if you've ever watched a lot of jiu-jitsu, what do people do when they take the back? They stay on the back and they look for the choke, right? It's like the most common thing. Backpacking. Aljamain Sterling has changed the meta, right? Get to the back, hold it for the rest of the round. Easy. That's not Andre Muniz. He gets to your back and he controls your arm. He falls over the top and he breaks your arm. He has one of the most exceptional armbar series you'll ever see in mixed martial arts. That's what he does really well. So I think that this fight is very simple and straightforward to me in a lot of ways. If Andre Muniz does not win via armbar or via 3 rounds of early takedown to back control, I think he's going to have a very hard time in this fight. The last couple guys he fought were very big, and that is a difference here because Jun Young Park is a smaller guy. So Jun Young Park has been taken down in the past, right? I think he does prefer to have a fight where he can dominate the wrestling, where he can dominate the grappling and feel a lot more safe. Muniz is a big fellow and he has some power in his hands. I know he doesn't look like it, but he does have some power in his hands as well. He throws with a lot of intention in the early going. So I think that we're going to see Muniz look like the much bigger guy. I think he's going to be very dangerous in the first round. I think if you like Jun Young Park, waiting to enter live towards the end of round 1 might be a wise move here, because we do see a disparity here. We've got a third degree black belt in Andre Muniz taking on, I believe, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt in Jun Young Park. And on top of that, right, he's going to be much bigger in height, 3 inches of height for Muniz, 5 inches of reach for Andre Muniz as well. He has arguably fought a higher level competition in the UFC, or certainly comparable level of competition, a little bit more professional experience. So overall, this fight just screams, not parlay, worthy at minus 200 to me. But I do think it should be a great scrap. So live entry on the Jun Young Park side, or looking to play Muniz in that early going. That's kind of the way that I see this. And I do think we could be seeing another example of potential recency bias on Jun Young Park. Why do I say that? Jun Young Park coming off of 4 straight wins. Same thing with Khalil Rountree. Guys, most of the time when people are on 4 straight wins, they're going to get a 5th straight win, right? Sure, but not every time. And everybody feels like they've got momentum. They're moving in the right direction. It's a lot easier to talk yourself into a fighter that's been having success than somebody that's been struggling. But we see it all the time in the UFC. People that have longevity, people that stick around for a while, they find ways to win fights. They find ways to stick around. So I don't think Muniz is a complete bum like a lot of people do. But I do think his cardio will absolutely hold him back at the higher level. So for me, the pick here reluctantly right now is Jin Park. But I do think Andre Muniz gets a lot of disrespect. He fought a pretty tough quality of opposition. And I do think that he's got a real skill set that most people have to reckon with in the UFC. Like Eric Anders, like I said, never been submitted before as a pro, fought a lot of good guys, fought some guys that know jiu-jitsu. He got submitted easily by Andre Muniz, and Andre Muniz was able to take him down with a blast double as well. Eric Anders is a big guy, strong guy, former football player, right? Jin Park is not that. Jin Park struggled mightily with the physicality of Eric Anders. So I do think we should always keep that in mind. How did they look against common opponents? Andre Muniz made Eric Anders look like a little man, right? And whereas we saw Eric Anders made Jin Park earn every second of that win when Jin Park got it. And it was the physicality that made all the difference there. So for me, Muniz and the physicality in the early going is going to be a real concern for Jin Park. With that being said, guys, I want to ask everybody that's rocking with us live, go ahead and drop a like on this video if you're enjoying the conversation. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section below so I can address them after the show as well, in case I don't get to anything on the air here. But I'm going to go a little bit rapid fire here because we got NFL Thursday coming up. I know that you guys have a lot more, that you've got going on today as well, but I appreciate you guys rocking with me. Appreciate everybody that subscribes to the show as well because we're talking about fights each and every week on the channel. And that said, let's go back to it. We've got Kenan Song taking on Kevin Jousset. And this is a fight where Kenan Song is coming off of a win, a redemptive win against Rolando Bedoya. But Rolando Bedoya quite under. Yo, guys, I think we're back. So sorry about that. Don't know what just happened. We haven't lost internet on this show in quite some time. My internet connection has been holding in there for me, and it had to have been something external because the Wi-Fi just cut out in my entire place. I went over, tried to fix it. I couldn't even close down the StreamYard link, guys. They completely disconnected me, but now I'm back. So sorry for that delay. I hope that you guys heard only the good parts of whatever I was saying. I got extremely frustrated over here with the loss of Wi-Fi. So if y'all heard me effing and blinding, I truly apologize. But yeah, I think the bookmakers got to us, guys. I think the bookmakers put out the order. Hey, no more giving out the gems, no more giving out these lines. But we're still going to push through and persevere regardless. So on the audio editing side, I'm going to do my best, guys, but there might just be a little blip on the podcast version of this show. But we're just going to fire on through anyways, guys. We don't know another way on this show. So we've got Kevin Jousset. He represents multiple demographics. Okay, he's a French fighter fighting out of Auckland, New Zealand. And for Kevin Jousset, he is a big guy, long, awkward. I don't think his striking is that much to write home about. Despite coming out of city kickboxing, he only has 4 wins by knockout. Watching his fights, we've seen guys like Jack Della Maddalena pretty cleanly outstrike him for large portions of the fight. Obviously, a very capable and talented fighter in that regard. And we've just seen that he has a win now in the UFC over Kiefer Crosby, but it doesn't tell us much. He kind of got brought in as one of these local market fighters. Hey, you're a city kickboxing guy. We'll put you on a city kickboxing fight card. And that's exactly what happened. So he got the win in that spot. God bless him for it. Good for him. Got the submission over Kiefer Crosby. And that is where I think that he has a chance to shine in his career. 1-0 career to the sub, but I think his ability to get takedowns, to hold people down, to use his length and his size at this weight class to try and press people against the fence, I think that's what makes the most sense for him here. We've seen Kenan Song be very competitive with the likes of Ian Gary, especially in the early going. He landed big shots, landed powerful strikes. And I think that we saw that Kenan Song is a capable fighter. He's probably the guy who gave Ian Gary his hardest run in the UFC. But we also saw he can be cracked on the chin. That's happened to him multiple times now in the UFC at this level at 33 years of age. That's somewhat to be expected. 9-4 career to the knockout, losses via KO against Ian Machado Gary, against Max Griffin, and against Brad Riddell. So that's the one that really stands out. Brad Riddell, 155-pound fighter, traditionally speaking, was able to go out there and get the knockout win over Song Kenan. So Song Kenan, his run, Rolando Bedoya, Callan Potter, Derek Krantz, Hector Aldana, Bobby Nash, none of those are really UFC level wins when you break it down, because none of those guys have stuck around at this level. Rolando Bedoya still has a chance to be something, I suppose, because he did go out there and lose 2 close decisions to Chaos Williams and then Kenan Song. But at this point, we don't really know where he stands. We don't know if he's going to be kept with the promotion at 26 years of age, probably gets offered another one, but I think there's a non-zero chance that he gets bounced, from the promotion. So you just look at a guy like Kenan Song, and does he deserve this opportunity? Yeah. I mean, he went out there, he got a win, kept his job with the promotion, 5-3 in the UFC. He's doing the jobs that they ask him to do, but I think they keep him around, personally speaking, as enhancement talent. I don't think they're trying to, rocking him up to a title shot or anything like that. So I think they're testing Kevin Jousset with this fight. They're trying to find out, hey, does your striking translate against a guy that is, let's say UFC average, right? Does your wrestling check out against a guy that hasn't really shown to have too much wrestling and grappling at the UFC level? You look at the record of Kenan Song, deceptive 9-0 to the submission prop, never been submitted in a whole host of fights. That's impressive stuff. However, who's the best grappler he's faced in the UFC? You would have to think it's either Ian Gary, Alex Morono. He hasn't really faced a very high level of grappler, typically speaking. And the guys that he has faced that are better grapplers than him, they were mostly content to strike. Ian Gary, I think, is a better grappler than Kenan Song. He was content to strike in that fight. I think the same thing can be said for Alex Morono from memory. I'd have to go back and watch that fight. I haven't seen it for quite some time. But when you look at it overall, I just don't trust Kenan Song's ground game, despite that 9-0 record, because I don't think it's truly been tested. In the same way, Kevin Jousset only has 1 win by submission. So I'm not really out here believing Kevin Jousset is like the next, Royce Gracie or something. But what I think is Kevin Jousset, big, strong, physical, more likely to end up on top in this spot. So I think Kenan Song is live to win by knockout. But I think if he doesn't knock him out, it's going to be a tough fight for him to win, because I could see Jousset just out wrestling him, getting on top, being physical, and beating him up. So for me, that's where it becomes dangerous. I think if Ian Gary had decided, he would have submitted Song Kenan, especially when he was hurt and rocked. So I think that Kevin Jousset has to avoid getting clipped on the chin here. He's got to make sure that he's diligent with his defense. But I think if he's smart, if he approaches this with a lot of takedowns, with a lot of confidence, I think he can get the fight to the ground, and I think he can win. So for me, kind of leaning towards this fight not to go the distance as well. I think a lot of people are expecting it to go to the cards, but I think Kenan Song's going to try and knock him out. And I think that Kevin Jousset's going to try to take him down. So for me, I just think that, both guys have a path to a finish here. I think Kenan Song, we don't have any reason to believe that he's a complete zero on the mat because of his wins by sub. But I just have a feeling if a bigger, stronger guy's on top of him beating him up, he could get submitted like anybody else. So Those are a couple things I'm thinking about when it comes to this fight, but I got to do a little more tape study because those aren't two guys that their tape is like ingrained in my brain, right? They're two kind of forgettable UFC fighters, to be fair. Sip of the coffee, and we're on to the next one, guys, where Shannon Ross is taking on Hyun Sung Park. Hyun Sung Park is a massive favorite in this spot, and I understand why in some regards. Shannon Ross just does not have a UFC level chin, period, point blank. I don't think there's any two ways about it. When you look at his recent performances, guys, Jesus Aguilar knocks him out with the first punch of the fight. Clayton Rodriguez hurt him with everything that he threw, finished him in that spot. Vinicius Salvador dropped him badly in the first round, hit him badly with a flying knee to the body, hurt him, then dropped him with punches, and then kind of slowed down, gassed out, and then finished him again in the third. Like basically, he gassed out completely, Vinicius Salvador. Then he was like holding himself back and just dropping him with counter punches against the fence one at a time. So I think that this guy has a really comically bad chin. You see that as well against Steven Erceg. Guys, Steven Erceg was able to finish him on the mat. No doubt about it. How did he do it? He clubbed and subbed him. Hurt him badly on the feet. So this guy has been dropped in the first round in 4 of his last 5 fights. He is just not a UFC level guy to me at all. But in terms of why are they giving him this fight? 2 reasons, in my view. Number 1, enhancement talent. Mike Breeden was kept around so they could try and get a win for Jubilee. I'm fully convinced about that. But what did it turn out? Jubilee wasn't good enough. So it didn't matter. They put him against one of the worst guys on the roster, one of the guys that was clinging to a job. How do you know that they wanted the other guy to win? They didn't re-sign Mike Breeden. They said, thanks anyway. See you later. So when you look at this fight, Hyun Sung Park, in my opinion, is the person they would like to win. Okay? But the problem that I have, or the slight concern that I have, it's just that Hyun Sung Park is a guy that tends to go out there, likes to wrestle, grapple, get the fight to the mat. But I do think that his striking is, passable, right? Shannon Ross, here's what's funny and interesting is like Shannon Ross, he doesn't have bad fundamentals. He lands a bunch of big shots against Vinicius Salvador, good left hands, good punches, right? Solid connections. But the problem is his opponents don't respect the punches he's throwing because you look at a guy like Shannon Ross, and let's just confirm this. I don't want to speak out of turn. He's got 7 wins by knockout, 4 losses by knockout. So technically a positive record. But you look at the guys he's fighting people with really abysmal records on the Australian regional scene. He's fighting people that just don't belong in there with him. And when he's fighting people that are real, when he's fighting anybody that's UFC level, they're landing 1 or 2 big punches and they're knocking him out. And that is a huge concern. Hyun Sung Park dealt with some adversity on the Contender Series, on the road to UFC. I misspoke there. But he is also a guy that went out there, won the road to UFC. I thought he did a fairly good job doing so. I thought that his opponent had some skills potentially to offer in that last fight, but Park was able to easily get the win there. So I'm looking at a guy in Park at 27 years of age. If he is not a complete fraud, he should be able to knock out Shannon Ross in the first round. But we haven't seen great results for the road to UFC fighters, with the exception of my boy Jekka at plus 400 cashing that ticket. So I think that this is a guy who they'd like to see win here, who has all the opportunity to do so. But I'm going to probably look for the under. I'm probably going to look for some violence in this spot again. I don't like to do this on every fight. I will always pick my spots accordingly. But just from a gut level feeling, I think that if Shannon Ross wins this fight, he's probably going to be in a bunch of exchanges and he might clip this guy, right? He's got some power in his hands. I mentioned that before. He's not a complete zero in the grappling. He did get tapped by Steve Erceg. That's his only submission loss. He's 1-1 career to the sub. So Shannon Ross likes to be on the feet. He likes to swing it out. And I don't think he's got a chin to do it. I think on the other side, Hyun Sung Park, if he is foolish, he might gas himself trying to wrestle or something here. But just like, if he goes out there and just lands punches on this guy's shin, I think he's going to hurt him. I think he's going to finish him. Almost every punch that Vinicius Salvador landed rocked and wobbled this guy. Same thing with other fighters that he's fought. Steve Erceg just kicked his leg, landed 1 big punch. The fight was basically over before it began. So I don't believe in Shannon Ross. I do think he is enhancement talent. And I think that he is not UFC level. But am I going to pay minus 600 for a guy who, I don't know that much about, who really has a lot to prove against UFC level fighters? No, I'm not going to do that either, because there is inherent volatility in this sport, right? You look at MMA, this is punching and kicking each other in the head, neck, face, and chest, right? It doesn't matter how good you are, how much of an advantage you have. There's inherent volatility. I always talk about the puncher's chance could be anywhere from 5 to 15%, depending on how you handicap this sport. I think there's a lot of randomness in these outcomes. So with that being said, Hyun Park should have the better hardware, should have the better skill set. And I think he's the promotional side as well here, but he is a social media B side in this spot. I don't give away all my insights on social media and other things just because it's a little proprietary information and I share it on Patreon. But I will just say in this spot, neither one of these guys has a social media following worth $1. So I think that for that reason, this is kind of a throwaway spot for the UFC. The road to UFC, they kind of like backed out of it with what they were supposed to do with this event, right? So a couple things that just seem a little bit sketchy to me for minus 600 again on a guy that most people have never even heard of. But with that being said, folks, let's move along to the next one here, where we've got Steve Garcia taking on Melk Costa. This is a rebooked fight. I'm going to be very short and sweet about this one, guys. I'll clip out the breakdown I already did for this and make sure that I put that out as well. But when you look, I just don't know how to feel about this fight. Rebooked after a week's notice. I think they moved it from 145 to 155. Steve Garcia, guy that tends to cut a ton of weight. So I think that's probably good for him. I think he was sick last week. That's probably not good for him. So I guess, 6 of one, half dozen of another, right? I don't know that it's a huge advantage. I think it's kind of a wash. So Melk Costa, younger guy, he's not going to be at a big size advantage here like he has been in some fights. But I think that as long as he doesn't get knocked out or clipped on the chin here, then I think he probably should just land more strikes over the course of the 15 minutes. I think Steve has worse defense. I think he's a little bit more open, with his aggression. But I also don't like betting on rebooked fights. So for me, this is probably just going to be a straight up pass. I had considered Melk Costa by sub the first time these guys scratched. And so for that reason, lines come down. I don't feel any need to force a bet on this fight. Next up, guys, we've got Luana Santos taking on Stephanie Egger. This should be a fascinating fight because you actually have two judokas here taking on one another, and you've got a young judoka in Luana Santos taking on a much older woman in the 35-year-old Stephanie Egger. Stephanie Egger, I do believe, is the more proven grappler of these two. She's competed at the ADCC. She's grappled with good girls in the UFC. However, she got knee barred last time out by Irina Alexieva. Really gross look in that spot considering Alexieva then went on to get absolutely obliterated by Melissa Dixon in her subsequent performance. Honestly, Stephanie Egger looked super shaky against Aylin Perez as well. I bet Aylin Perez there bigly, 4 units at plus 250. I thought she was competing really well. I just did not like what I had seen from Stephanie Egger in terms of the Mayra Buena Silva fight, kind of playing with the rules a little bit, skirting the edge there. Tracy Cortez absolutely dominated her, wrestling over judo. That's what we found out that night. I'm playing all my judo friends out there. I'm just messing with you, but you know what I mean. The wrestling of Tracy Cortez certainly was dominant that night. She beat Shannon Young. She beat Jessica Rose Clark. Frankly, those two women, I don't believe are UFC level at all. So when I'm looking at this, losing to Mayra Buena Silva, I'll forgive that. Losing to Irina Alexieva, I'm a lot more skeptical of. Now, if this was a chalk price on Stephanie Egger, I would probably be just looking to fade it on principle, but she is the underdog here. And I think she's going to attract a lot of attention because she's a bigger girl, by the numbers here, 1 inch reach advantage, very similar in size, a little bit stronger probably, but Luana Santos has lost before to Jenna Bishop, a girl that was able to challenge her in the wrestling, take her down, get her to the mat, and win positions on top, as well as winning some positions on the feet with pressure by coming forward and making Luana Santos work for the duration of the bout. So when I'm looking at this fight on paper, I say to myself, who does the UFC want to put in a position to succeed? That is obvious. It is Luana Santos by a mile, right? I think they want to see Luana Santos go out there and continue her rise. She went out there and knocked out Juliana Miller. Juliana Miller, been enhancement talent for the UFC lately. Veronica Hardy, as well as Luana Santos, going out there, getting big, impressive wins over her. And you look at the fight that she had with Waleska Souza on the regional scene for Luana Santos, clearly that was her follow-up performance against Jenna Bishop. Clearly she worked on her offensive wrestling, her defensive wrestling in that spot. But her grappling, I would say, is still somewhat of a work in progress. So for me, kind of interested in this fight not going the distance, in this fight ending by sub. I could see either one of these women making a catastrophic catastrophic error, but I like the aggression, the youth of Luana Santos. I think she's a much more marketable fighter. So she's going to be my lean here, but not extremely bullish in this spot. I do think fascinating matchup, and I need to do more tape study of the specific judo dynamics between these two so I can get a better gauge for who's going to end up on top. Next up, guys, let's talk about Tatsuro Taira taking on Carlos Hernandez. If you guys have been watching the show for a long time, you know Tatsuro Taira, one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, one of my boys lately. I've really enjoyed watching Tatsuro Taira's rise. Shout out to my boy Fubo as well in the chat here. What I'm thinking of in this spot is you got two guys here who are both very talented, but I think that one guy's talent stands way above the other, and that's Tatsuro Taira. You've got a 30-year-old in Carlos Hernandez who is very sound, very skilled, but just 9-2 at 30 years of age. So not as much professional experience as you would want to see. He does have wins over the likes of Charles Johnson, Brandon Olivas, on the regional scene in the amateur. So this is a guy with very serious wins, Jose Johnson as well, throughout the course of his career. But those were shorter bouts, right? Amateur bouts. Now what we're looking at is a guy in Carlos Hernandez who got submitted in the first round by Alan Nascimento. Nascimento was supposed to be on this card. And then he was able to get the win over Denise Bondar, another close decision win over Victor Altamirano, a pair of close decisions over Daniel Barras as well. So when you're looking, he's a guy that has I'm sorry about the headphone users. Rip headphone users, he says, because I shouted Taira. My apologies there, small world. But the bottom line for me on this fight is I think you've got one guy who has proven in his recent performances, in Carlos Hernandez, that most of the time against good fighters, they can get to him with takedowns. They can out-grapple him a little bit. They can force him to work, and he's got good cardio, but he can put himself in bad positions and bad situations. And I think that for him, this is a bad matchup. You look at Tatsuro Taira, he is excellent on the ground, 7-0 career to the submission, 3-0 career to the knockout. His striking needs a lot of work. It's still a work in progress, but I think people talk about his striking as though it's completely useless, and I disagree with that. I think he's got power in his left hand. I think he can be clever at times with his kicks, both low and high. And I think of a guy like Tatsuro Taira as very poised. He's been in several deep guillotines in the UFC. He's never panicked. He's always maintained his composure and then gotten out, stayed safe on top. And most of the time, he works to finish these guys. And a lot of these guys have been very talented, about very diligent, let's say, about just defending the back attacks. They know what he's going to attack with. Taira has a great armbar series as well as a great rear naked choke series from the back. But I think that Taira has a great club and sub opportunity, just in terms of, if you look at his regional fights, that's how he got a lot of submission wins along the way as well. He would land a big left hand, and when somebody was cracked or rocked in an exchange, his back taking was extremely fast. It was extremely slick, and he puts the show to bed. So what I really like about Taira is his finishing instincts, his ability to control people from the back, to get back to good positions when he ends up on bottom. We saw he ends up on bottom full guard in a handful of fights, and he's literally able to take the back from full guard in the bottom position, things that I know are very difficult to do, that require a great deal of flexibility. And I know that Tatsuro Taira has continued to improve. He's a very young fighter that has made significant improvements, I would argue, over the course of his career. We look at a guy like Taira in this spot, and everybody's expecting him to win by submission. But I do think that if he's able to take this fight to the ground and control it, we've seen Hernandez put in very dangerous situations where the fight could be stopped via positional TKO. And I think that that is not a impossibility here. Taira can do a lot of damage with his elbows as well as with his hands on the feet. So I think of this as a great fight. An interesting test for Taira. He's coming in with that blonde hair this time, right? Blonde Taira, a whole new ball game, whole different ball of wax for people to deal with. And I think he's trying to get that marketability up. I think he's trying to get connected more with the fans. He kind of looks like, an unassuming guy. And then he goes out there and puts on great performances. So I really like Tatsuro Taira. I have a very detailed tape study of his early career. And I just think that he's going to continue to make improvements and continue to push towards that title opportunity. So I don't like fading Valley Flow Striking Academy. I think they're a great gym. I think they produce great fighters and great talents. I think Carlos Hernandez can beat a lot of guys in the UFC. But I think that Alan Nascimento submitting him in the first round told me a lot of what I needed to know for this fight. I think Josh Neal submitting him on the regional scene on the amateurs tells me something. And I just think that Daniel Barres and Victor Altamirano giving him super close fights, I think is a red flag coming into this fight, because I think Taira can get to dominant positions and really enforce his will. So with that being said, I'm taking Tatsuro Taira. I think he's getting the job done once again. No 10-unit max bet for me this time, but he's come through twice for me in those exact circumstances, and I've really believed in his game the whole way. So, at minus 200, like he used to be, he was a great bet. Now he's all the way up to minus 500 because of the inherent volatility of MMA. No value on those prices, but I think he's going to get the job done here on Saturday. And last but not least, guys, we've got Rayanne Dos Santos taking on Talita Alencar. And let's be very simple about this fight. Rayanne Dos Santos, I'm not sure exactly how to evaluate her talent at this weight class. We've seen her out physical by the likes of Denise Gomes. We've seen her, out wrestled before, taken down, submitted. We've seen her put in all sorts of bad situations. But you look at her recent run, Denise Gomes has proven to be very difficult for people to beat so far in the UFC. Angela Hill, a very seasoned vet, the only one to get the job done. But you're looking on the Rayanne Amanda side. If you take out that fight with Denise Gomes, she beat Jillian DeCourcy. She beat several women in Invicta. And it looks like she's been really putting together some skills. I believe her husband also trains mixed martial arts. So she goes out there and she really tries to put, a game together. And I think at 105 pounds, she's tended to have some success. But I think physicality, strength can really give her a problem. What is interesting about this fight is Talita Alencar last time out really struggled with the size and strength of Stephanie Luciano Rondinha, right? And Rondinha was able to, outlast her, looked much better in the third round there. And I think that Talita Alencar, she's a front-loaded fighter. She can have her best success in the early going if she gets takedowns. She has one third-round submission on her resume, whereas she has two first-round submissions on her resume. And that makes sense to me. That tracks with what I'm seeing. I think she does slow down over the course of 15 minutes, but I also think she's strong, she's physical, and she could potentially get into, top position in this fight. If she's able to get Rayanne Amanda down to the mat, I think she could have some success. But she's a much older woman in this spot. She's not at a significant plus money price tag, so I don't feel compelled to play this. I believe that I picked Rayanne Dos Santos and Talita Alencar to win their fights, and then Talita Alencar obviously had the draw. But on the Rayanne Dos Santos side, she lost to Denise Gomes. I picked her to beat Gomes back in the day. So I think that Rayanne Dos Santos has to be my pick here based on the ABCs that say always bet on cardio. I think she's better conditioned athlete. She's got way more experience. But I also don't believe in laying the minus chalk price here next to her name when she is still just 28 years of age, where she's got a lot of experience, a weight class below, and where we've seen she's had problems on the ground. She's been finished, been submitted before. And this is a very quality jiu-jitsu player that she would be taking on. So I think that ways you can get sneaky in this fight, ends by sub potentially. I think both of these women going to be willing to take it to the mat, going to exchange a little bit on the ground. And I think the cardio dynamic could open up that submission opportunity for Rayanne Dos Santos, whereas I think in the early going, Alencar would have the ground advantage. So there you have it, guys. We have done our first look for the day. RIP headphone users once again with the clap, but I appreciate you all for being here tremendously. If you guys want more information from me, you can find that all easily in the description box below, whether that's information for the Lab VIP. They have been absolutely on fire. I want to shout out Prop God. I want to shout out Jonesy Trends. I want to shout out Commish Film Room. I want to shout out my guy Rebound. These are my brothers in the lab. They've been doing a hell of a job, and I just wanted to give them some credit, shout them out. They are absolutely crushing NBA, NFL, sports that I don't understand the first thing about. So shout out to them. In terms of what else I've got going on this week, we're working on a panel show for tomorrow, guys. That is the big announcement. Our guy Rich down for the count, not feeling so well this week. No problem there. We'll get him back on in the future, but going to make sure that we still bring a great show to you guys for Bets and Banter. So stay tuned. If you guys have suggestions, who you'd want to hear from on the panel show, go ahead and drop them in the comment section below. But we already have a couple guests in mind, a couple friends of the show that you guys love. So really excited. Thank you guys all so much for being here. Appreciate you guys for the support. If you could drop a like, means the world to me. If you can tell a friend about the show, if they like fighting, hey, I think they'll enjoy it too. And thank you guys who put up with the fact that we lost connection there in the middle. That was something completely outside of my control, but to see that there were still 50 people rocking with us live when we got back, it was an absolute blessing. So thank you all so much. This will be out on podcast as soon as possible. A lot more content coming from me in the near future. So God bless you all. Thank you so much. Enjoy those fights. And until next time, come back. We're having all the same fun again. Take care, everybody.